the tariffs that have been long awaited, many of them take effect today. We're going to be seeing increased prices throughout the rest of the year, but there are some estimates that say that the worst of the price increases could take up to like 8 months to make their effects felt. What we're seeing now in terms of increases are in part due to the fact that it's not directly the tariffs, but it's the freezing of economic activity that has resulted from the constant daily back and forth and uncertainty created by this bizarre tariff negotiation that is mostly about Donald Trump's ego and having countries and companies come to him. That's why he's excited about Tim Cook groveling at his feet. He is trying to consolidate his power and loves the idea of the world's biggest countries or companies coming to him and having to bend the knee. And we're orienting our economy around the whims of this particular guy, which is just a part of the authoritarianism that we're seeing ramp up. And this fight with Brazil is particularly insane because, I'm going to repeat this for people, we had a trade surplus with Brazil. Trump has been saying this is all about deficits. We have a trade surplus with Brazil. We sell billions more to Brazil than they sell to us. We had last year over $7 billion trade surplus with Brazil and over $90 billion in trade. We trade energy, steel, iron, and more with Brazil, but the commodities that come back in our trade relationship are 100% going to be affected by this, particularly beef. So the United States has been increasingly reliant on Brazilian beef. It's up to a fifth of the beef that we import into this country, and it's like hamburger meat, ground beef. So we're going to see burger prices likely increase in this country. We also import seafood from Brazil, tuna, things like that. I was reading in Reuters, I think, that the United States is something like 70% of fishing exports for Brazil. So this could basically bankrupt that industry down there. Coffee is another big one. Like, part of this tariff insanity is some of these commodities we can't even grow and make here. We can grow some coffee in Hawaii, but for the most part, we've got to import coffee. And this is going to affect coffee imports as well. So this is also, interestingly, kind of a bit of a gift to Lula domestically. He's had a rockier second time around here, and there's been some inflation issues down in Brazil, of course. But he's getting a polling bump from some of his fights with Donald Trump. There was a poll that Bloomberg News took down in Brazil and showing that he's ahead of his 2026 race. So with that in mind, here is Brazilian President Lula talking about Trump and their negotiations, and this is a translation over his actual words.
Então, o que está acontecendo?
So what is happening?
A forma.
The civilized way for two heads of state to negotiate is to have the will to take the decision along with Brazil.
Contra o Brasil, ele poderia ter comunicado ao Brasil.
He could have communicated with Brazil. He could have called. He could have proposed a negotiation. But we received the taxation statement in a completely authoritarian manner. And we are not used to negotiating in this way. Not like this.
E não é assim que nós estamos acostumados a negociar. Não é assim. Mesmo nesse momento,
in that moment, we still have a lot of people in Brazil trying to talk with Americans.
com gente americana. Nós acreditamos que país que
We believe that a country that has 201 years of civilized diplomatic relations will not throw that away because of the intemperate attitude of a president.
destemperada de presidente da República. Deixa eu lhe falar uma coisa, presidente da República não pode ficar se humilhando.
Let me tell you something. A president cannot humiliate himself for another president.
Eu respeito todo mundo.
So that's him. The quote that's making the rounds is the humiliated quote. And we've seen that, like Mexico, for example, despite Claudia Sheinbaum being on the left, has largely escaped some of Trump's ire here, in part because she approached the negotiations from a position of strength, both in her tactics, but also in the fact that Mexico has enormous leverage here. Brazil has leverage too. because Brazil is one of the world's biggest countries, and we do have a significant trade relationship with them. To go back to what I said, and we'll keep repeating it, we have a trade surplus with Brazil. When Trump was saying that he was supposed to only be targeting these deficits, it's insanity. But good thing Americans don't like hamburgers, right? Well, the Republicans have been saying for years that Democrats want to take away meat from you. Trump wants to take away your hamburgers because he's pissed that Lula da Silva and Brazil is prosecuting his friend for trying to do a coup. This is the America First guy. We're going to raise prices for imports from Canada because they dare to recognize a Palestinian state. And Trump's friend in another country is in some legal trouble, so we're going to raise your coffee and beef prices for America First, right?
Coffee, beef, and fish takes me out completely.
Oh, I mean, time to move. So, like, this is going to be really impactful. And they're struggling to get out of this. Like, when you ask Americans, too, in public polling about tariffs, it is overwhelmingly unpopular. Something like 70 to 80% of Americans are concerned about the tariffs. It's quite difficult for them to message around this, especially because a guy like Scott Bessant here is a typical Wall Street money guy. And everybody in his orbit is pissed about this kind of thing. Here he is this morning on MSNBC. Also, it's evident that they're even going on MSNBC to have to make their case here. That's how worried I think they are. One, about the markets, because the markets are freaked out. And two, about trying to sell this to people. Here he is on MSNBC, kind of being cornered here by, who's this anchor? I'm not sure his name.
Eugene Robinson?
Eugene Robinson, there we go. Great speaking voice. I'm not really familiar with him, but he's on Morning Joe, so we probably don't have a ton in common politically. Regardless, this was a great kind of subtle way that he cornered Scott Bessant here.
Economy in a changing world. Mr. Secretary, there's one question I got to ask you, because there has been some confusion. So we've got a tariff of, what, 50% on Brazil now, I think. And so if someone here, an importer, wants to buy Brazilian products today or tomorrow and import them, they're going to pay 50% to the Treasury. And so who writes that check?
Well, a couple of things. First, we could have substitutions, so there's very little that only comes from Brazil. It could come from Argentina, it could come from...
right, but assuming it does come from Brazil, say, or it comes from any country with a tariff, who writes the check to the Treasury?
Well, the check is written to the person who receives it at the dock in the U.S.
I'm sorry. Just looked it up quickly. Argentina accounts for around 1.5 to 2.5% of the beef imports to the United States. Brazil, a fifth to a fourth, around that. So this isn't like any other country can replace this trade relationship. But just go back like 10 seconds.
Tariff, who writes the check to the Treasury?
Well, the check is written to the person who receives it at the dock in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. The check is written by the person who receives it at the dock. So the tariff is paid in this country by the importer, is that right?
But the Brazilian exporter could decide that they want to keep market share. They could lower their price so that the full 50% of the tariff, say,
they could eat part of the cost. They could eat part of the tariff,
which is what we've seen.
Okay. But the check is written by the importer, right at the dock.
Yeah, and then the importer can pass it on or not.
Okay.
All right.
So they move on from that, but that silence and that gulp. The importer, the for-profit company that has no morality and is just interested in shareholder value and profit and that kind of thing, they could decide to pass it on, or they could decide to take less money for themselves and eat it. Which one will these companies decide to do? It's really hard for me to figure out.
I mean, like we've been talking about, it's going to wipe out anybody but the largest corporations, which have money to play with on this sort of thing.
Exactly. And even they're pissed about it because it's going to be impactful across the economy. When we're talking about the situation that Trump is setting up right now with tariffs, which are inflationary because they increase prices, because even though Basant is trying to lie his way out of it, it is passed on to the consumer. So it's a compounding sales tax, which is already a regressive tax because it proportionately impacts people more the lower their income is, because the price of a good is the same for everybody. But if you have less money, it's more of a tax on you proportionally than if you have more money. So tariffs are going to increase basically sales tax, or that's how they will function. So it's going to be passed on disproportionately to lower income Americans, disproportionately to middle income Americans compared to upper class. And as you go down the list, that's how it's going to work. And what this lunacy protectionism is doing as well is also just continuing to strengthen Brazil's relationship with China. We're going to see this across different countries with economic power. India is a big question in all of this. Modi is in a more precarious political situation. His party took a hit last election cycle. How does he manage this? Ideologically, he and Donald Trump, of course, are close together, but he has to think about his own self-interest here.
Trump's been alienating him. Edward Moose in the FT has a good piece on basically how Trump's entire term so far has been a big gift to China, and from the taking credit for the ceasefire between India and Pakistan, which Modi's like, no. And also like tariffing Taiwan, which is where we get all of our semiconductors, which is, people should check out the map, how close Taiwan is to China, and like what would happen if, say, we drove Taiwan more into China's hands, like, and we're worried about them taking it by force. We might just be forcing them to have a better relationship with China through our insanity.
Yeah. And
all of this is about American capitalists' impotence, and Trump's trying to lash out, thinking we're going to be able to make Japan drive Ford F-150s. Like, I don't know. It seems so self-defeating to me.
Because I mean, I don't even think it's that well thought out. Forgive this sports reference, okay? But people will have to deal with it for just a second. Right now, the Cowboys are having these insane negotiations with Micah Parsons, who's the best defensive player in the league. And Jerry Jones reminds me so much of Trump. He keeps delaying these contract negotiations, and the more they delay, the more expensive it goes because the cap keeps going up, and the player gets more leverage. And the outcome is largely irrelevant to him. It's because he's like in his 80s. He's an old kind of, slimy business guy from back in the day. And it's the negotiation and like the feeling of empowerment as an old businessman and the deal-making process and the back and forth that's almost like, I don't know, fetishized by these guys. It's like their golden hours where they get to feel important again and have the negotiations come to them and they can control everything. And it's like Trump is doing that with tariffs. The outcome is irrelevant to making the dear leader feel like he's the most powerful person on the planet.
I would use a different metaphor. It's like a toddler who realizes that all of the adults get really concerned about paying the toddler attention when they grab their phones.
Right.
So like grabbing a phone or like going to an expensive Voss, that's basically this tariff thing. And all the world leaders, and a lot of them are caving to him. Lula, and Sheinbaum, also the Trump negotiated a trade deal with Canada and Mexico, so it's hard. He's kind of constrained a little bit by that, and deciding to go at the entire rest of the world. I mean, it's insanity. And just generally speaking, Congress is to blame for this. It should not give him the leverage to do this. The justification for it is for emergencies, which are about fentanyl, which is a joke. The idea that, and illegal immigration or whatever, like these aren't real concerns. Congress should take these abilities out of his hands. And unfortunately, they wanted to give him to Obama as well for the TPP at the end of his term. But Congress needs to step up and be in charge of what's going on in this country in terms of like what industries are going to benefit and all that other stuff. But we got some ads.
That was part of the leverage that Chuck Schumer, our good friend at this program, gave away.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.